Hello everybody, this is a continuation of the first SpaceX video that I did. This is going to be talking about Starship, human spaceflight, and the rideshare program that they have. First thing that we're going to go into is the Starship, and this is essentially it's going to be the biggest ship that we have, and it's going to be slightly, uh, it's the biggest ship that we're going to have for probably quite a while. The SLS is supposed to have more cargo space for it, but it's also going to be orders of magnitude more expensive. Like the Starship is designed to eventually be able to essentially have 50 people into orbit and 100 tons of cargo. I think the SLS is supposed to be like 105 tons or 110, but the problem with the SLS is not it's not reusable, which Starship is designed to be. Now, the Starship, as of this video, Starship has not launched into space yet. I'm pretty sure that they've gone up to 20 kilometers, and but they've been looking at a lunar transfer window, so they were looking at sending it around the moon at one point in a couple of years. I don't know how that's going to work yet, but they need to do FAA licensing about that. They actually just got in trouble for that because they sent up the Starship for a test, but then the FAA, like, I think they got in trouble for sending them up without some sort of clearance. I think it was because they didn't want to. I think it was like an insurance risk for them. But in this particular case, this is what Starship is going to look like. Maybe, yep. It's going to be 120 meters high, and I'm not sure if this. I think this part is. I think this is actually the 120 meters. It's going to be 9 meters in diameter, which essentially means it's going to be as probably as wide as a house, at least a small one, and it's going to be able to send up 100 tons into orbit. The two stages, but the first stage actually is going to be able to, at least they're thinking of trying to make sure that it can go all the way up into orbit by itself from Earth. However, the problem with that is when they do that, I think it's going to drain all their fuel without any reserves. Um, so it'll be an SSTO, a single stage to orbit ship, but that's where this thing comes from, or it comes in. This thing is going to be essentially a very big scaled up Falcon 9 rocket. However, different materials. If you notice that this is silver and then the Falcon 9 was like white, that's because they're making the Starship out of instead of out of like titanium or carbon composite, they're making it out of steel. There's some sort of proprietary high tensile steel that they've been trying to essentially use in order to do that. I think it's proprietary. I don't think it's proprietary to SpaceX. I think it's proprietary to whoever manufactures it. But here's the actual ship, and this thing is supposed to be able to transport about 50 people uh, pretty comfortably all the way up into orbit. So just like Dragon, the Starship actually is going to have two different types. But unlike Dragon, these things are going to be significantly different because the passenger version is going to be basically like this, and then I think they're thinking about putting a crane in here somewhere. But the let me see. Yeah. So over here, come on. So back here, you can actually see some of the other stuff that they're planning on. Where is it? Okay. So this is supposed to show you a large satellite coming out of basically the mouth of the Starship, kind of like a giant whale. I wouldn't be surprised if they named the first one Jonah or something, but so essentially I'm pretty sure I'll find this later in the video. But this is still going to be able to send 100 people up, and they'll have huge clouds of satellites coming out of it. Let's see. Oh, here we go. So this thing is the satellite thing that they're trying to show you. Uh, the large satellite coming out. So then that way, that's I think they were talking about doing the Europa Clipper as one of their I guess launch contracts because the SLS is so far behind the SpaceX Starship project at this point. So I don't think they were trying to use a Starship. I think they were trying to use a Falcon 9 Heavy. Uh, let's see. And then they're trying to talk about dropping down massive amounts of cargo, but you could probably fit a gigantic amount of, uh, like, I mean, think about the size of this thing. You could probably fit essentially most of, like, half the space station in there, and probably be able to send up a massive amount of resources. Now, here's one thing about the moon missions that they were thinking of, because the moon mission is actually an afterthought for Elon Musk. He still wants to go Mars direct, but one of the things about the Starship is it produces so much thrust that there's a large worry about sending the Starship in its entirety down to the surface of the moon right now, because if you do that, it might kick up all of a bunch of dust into orbit, which would cause a navigational hazard for any future lunar missions. Although at the same time, it does require significantly less uh, uh, velocity in order to orbit the moon. It's still possible to cause serious Kesslerization issues on the moon just from landing a Starship there. So what they might try to do is put like a platform on the moon. At least that's what I would do. But this is the thing that they wanted to use the Starship for. They wanted to use it as interplanetary transport to go from Earth to Mars. And they're trying to come up with ways of doing that. Uh, there's actually a lot of planetary protection issues that happens to be on Mars, so they might not get the permission from the government, at least not initially. So here's the first private lunar mission is it's talking about a circle around the moon. They want to get this over by the moon in 2023. Uh, it's a Japanese businessman who announced this in September 2018. Let's see, down to human spaceflight. Human spaceflight, obviously the Crew Dragon. Uh, so far, they've sent up, as of this video, they've sent up 2 ships, both to the ISS. I think a total of 6 astronauts. But they're the first people who have sent anyone up from the United States in almost 10 years anyway. And they are the only ones who have been able to service the space station in that way outside of the Russians. So, as any of the Western nations, it's basically them. Uh, they have been, let's see, as far as I'm aware, they have also been talking about sending SpaceX ships in order to help build the Lunar Gateway Station. I think they actually did uh, award the contract to the Lunar Gateway Station instead of the SLS. So again, Mars is still Elon Musk's primary objective, though. So here's another thing that's really interesting. When you go into, you can actually go into SpaceX's website and see the rideshare thing. One thing that I did notice when I was looking this up and doing the first attempt on this video uh, was when you go into this, and it doesn't really matter whatever uh, what this is, but input payload mass, and then you can do 100 kilograms, and then you see $1 million, 1,000 kilograms, it goes up there. So there's actually a market floor for a sales floor for how much for any particular object that you send up. So if you send up even a 10 kilogram rocket or a 10 kilogram satellite, like a nanosat, it's still going to be $1 million, at least at the moment. I'm assuming that that's going to change when Starship is up, and then when rideshares become significantly more of a thing, which I wouldn't be surprised if it does fairly quickly. And that is pretty much the end of all of their programs, except for Starlink. I don't know why they haven't put Starlink up here. So Starlink is actually, hold on, let's see. Starlink is supposed to be a system where they're bringing, yeah, so they're bringing up about 4,500 satellites. Originally, it was planned on being 12,000, but they ended up dropping it because I think they were able to change it so it was more effective. But it's essentially low latency broadband internet, basically satellite internet. However, it's high speed, and with this cloud of satellites in low Earth orbit, a lot of issues were coming up because originally they weren't really sure about doing this because it is uh, a lot of satellites, thousands of satellites, right? So a huge, uh, if they have a huge number of satellites, it causes potential Kesslerization issues, which could cause debris in orbit and then cause issues. But with that, yeah, so these are designed to promote rural and uh, impoverished areas to have their own internet system, to provide internet to essentially the entire planet. So, um, that I think they were talking about a market revenue of like $12 billion, and Elon Musk was talking about using that to help finance the missions to Mars. So, with that, I that is the end of the Starlink or the SpaceX videos, at least for now, and I will see you later.